Welcome to Beyond the Broadsheet, a podcast by the Lincoln County News. We are a community newspaper based in Mid-Coast, Maine, and we provide the most comprehensive, in-depth coverage available anywhere of the 18 towns and one plantation that make up Lincoln County. I'm Allie Jewell, and I'm a reporter here at LCN covering the towns of Newcastle, Damascotta, Edgecombe, and Whitefield.
And I'm Christina Wallace, and I'm also a reporter here at LCN, and I cover the towns of Waldoboro, Bremen, Bristol, and South Bristol.
In our last episode, LCN's own Molly Rains and Sarah Masters talked about their visit to Monhegan. This week, Molly chats with Michael Amico, the founder of Waldoboro's Open House of History, in our second segment. But first, here are some of the top stories from the Thursday, July 31st edition of the Lincoln County News. Newcastle celebrated the near completion of a 16-unit apartment complex with a ribbon-cutting ceremony on Tuesday, July 29th, which I went to. It was very fun and exciting.
It sounds very fun and exciting.
Governor Janet Mills stopped by to help everyone celebrate the occasion. The one-bedroom apartments are at 16 Mills Road, just a stone's throw from downtown. And as the state tries to address low housing supply, Mills said the new complex is one example of affordable and efficient housing in the state. Rob Nelson broke ground on the property back in October, and he's excited for tenants to start moving in between August 15th and September 1st. He said, "It's a big accomplishment. I think it's a really cool addition for the community." And I agree.
Nice. So I know we kind of talked about this earlier, but what was it like to meet Janet Mills for the first time?
You know, it was very cool, calm, collected vibes. She came, I saw her like car pull in, and I suspected, I mean, it looked like the kind of car that you'd expect the governor of a state to pull up in.
Yeah.
But she was talking to everyone like she sees them on the daily. Like the town officials were like, "Oh, hey, Janet, like what's new with you?" It was very funny and cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's super exciting.
Yes, yeah.
The Starboard Cafe sets sail in New Harbor. Jennifer and Keith Jones had a soft opening for the Bristol restaurant in early July. It's located at 137 Huddle Road, which is the former location of the Cupboard Cafe. The menu currently has breakfast and lunch offerings, including breakfast sandwiches and pastries. Jennifer Jones said, "What we wanted to do for the longest time was to open something for comfort food for locals." Jennifer said that she looks forward to staying open in the winter and eventually extending hours for dinner service. So that's super exciting.
Yeah, I love spots that are kind of committed to being winter spots.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because I feel like, you know, there are a lot of seasonal spots for tourists and things like that, but it's really cool for those of us who live here year round to experience some fun stuff too.
Yeah, we got to feel the love.
I know, right?
In other news, the Cheney Financial Group made transitions to a new generation. Dennis Hilton is preparing to pass Newcastle Realty, Cheney Insurance, and Newcastle Vacation Rentals over to a fifth generation. The new ownership group includes his sons Nathan and Chris Hilton, their wives Hannah and Jessica, and longtime employee Joe Ford. Hannah Hilton has worked at Cheney Financial Group for 5 years, and she's leading the transition and has already started overseeing day-to-day operations at Cheney Insurance and Newcastle Vacation Rentals. I know when I talked to Dennis, he said that he had kind of accepted the fact that his sons maybe were not game to take on the business. So he seemed very excited that they eventually came to him and were like, "Yeah, we do want to take on the financial group." So
That's awesome.
yeah.
Keep the business going.
Yes.
Which is really exciting. A new adult use cannabis store opens in Wiscasset. Jar Cannabis Company opened a new location in Wiscasset last month, so around mid-June. This is a Maine-rooted brand, and it's named after its co-owners Joel Pepin, Adam Platts, and Ryan Roy, which makes Jar.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Jar cultivates and manufactures its own products on top of operating 9 locations. The company is licensed to make things like vape cartridges and gummies. Pepin said the company plans to keep expanding with 2 openings already scheduled for next year, although he did tell me that those locations are currently a surprise, and so he would not reveal where they are. So stay tuned for that. This Wiscasset location is going to have a grand opening event on August 8th from 1 to 5. So definitely go check them out then.
Yeah, very exciting stuff. In some municipal news, Wiscasset voted to send $10.7 million education budget to polls. Wiscasset residents passed a new $10,744,119 education budget on Wednesday, July 29th at the Wiscasset Elementary School. And this may be the second time people are hearing about this. No, you're not imagining it. This is the second time this year that Wiscasset residents have had to approve an education budget because the first version failed to reach validation back in June, which Christina actually covered.
I did cover that. Fun fact, that was the first story I ever wrote for Lincoln County News.
Ain't that crazy?
Yeah. I remember it was our first Wednesday morning before print, and it was like coming into the office, finding out that education budget did not pass was pretty wild. My first breaking news. So that was pretty cool.
That's funny. Yeah, Maya and I were reflecting back on that as we were editing this story. We were like, wow, it was only 2 months ago, but 2 months feels so far.
Yeah, it's been a fast amount of time, but also a long amount of time. I don't know if that makes sense.
No.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
I feel you. So at this special town meeting, Superintendent Kim Anderson talked about the process of switching up the budget. They tried to cut around $150,000 worth of funds, which mostly ended up coming off of the facilities and management spending, which covers electricity, water, sewer costs. She said that pretty often the schools have ended up coming in under their projected numbers, so she thought that was a good place to cut from. Luckily, the changes didn't affect personnel or programming. That was a big goal for the school committee. So, now it's going to go back to the polls for hopeful validation this time. Second time may be the charm, and that'll be in September. So, yeah.
Awesome. In other municipal news, the Bremen mill rate was set, and it is up 45 cents from last year. They set it at their special meeting on Wednesday, July 23rd. And the mill rate this year is going to be $8.60, which is a 45-cent increase, or 5.52% from last year. And the town clerk, Melanie Pendleton, said that the town did not expect a big increase this year. Of course, it's always hard to tell based on what their assessors say, but not incredibly significant. So pretty good.
What was it like looking through your first mill rate information? Because when I did the first one last week or the week before, that was a little confusing for me.
Yeah,
personally.
for sure. I think one of the biggest challenges has just been to learn municipal budgets and what all of that looks like.
Yeah.
So I feel like the more that I do it, the more it makes sense.
No,
so
that's fair.
So when I do this again next year, it'll be smooth sailing.
Easy breezy. Newcastle Select Board also approved a 70-cent mill rate increase. So Newcastle set their new mill rate at a Monday, July 28th meeting where the Select Board approved a $14.30 mill rate, which is 70 cents or 5.14% more than last year. Even though an increase is never ideal. Town manager Kevin Sutherland said the rate is lower than the 9% increase he anticipated in his budget summary. And a lot of that is thanks to increasing value within Newcastle. So kind of a point of good news.
Yeah, absolutely. The Somerville Select Board issues fines to predecessors. The board talked about fines sent to former board members at a Wednesday, July 16th meeting. Don Whitmer-Keene, Don Chase, Chris Johnson, and former Secretary Sandra Devaney received fines for negligence that led to the town falling behind on fiscal audits. The letter notifying the former officials of the fine also said the town may pursue further legal action. Johnson said during a phone interview that he did not purposefully avoid getting the audits completed. On the fines being issued, Johnson said, it's meant to be a public spectacle and punitive rather than substantive, which is what it achieves. So, yeah, more Somerville news to come.
Yeah, sounds like it. In Newcastle, a surgeon pens a new cookbook directs proceeds to all-girls school in Pakistan, which is by our intern, soon to leave, Nora Conlon. Dr. Rafit Zaidi, an orthopedic surgeon at Maine Health Lincoln Hospital, recently released a cookbook called Pakistani Cooking 101, Easy Pakistani Meals, a guide for beginners. The book features tons of family recipes, including vegan and vegetarian dishes, and Zaidi said that a lot of the recipes were inspired, not directly pulled from his mom's cooking.
So, oh, nice.
Yeah. Sales from the book will help fund an all-girls school in Bastiawan that Zaidi helped found. He said that each drop of rain adds to the splash of water in the ocean. My contribution is just a very small drop in the ocean.
That's really sweet. I'm always looking for new food to cook. So that'll be fun. I have not tried Pakistani food yet. So
it's good. I definitely would... I recommend it, and I am like, I need to pick up this cookbook because I feel like it'd be really fun. I believe
really fun.
It's available at Sherman's.
So. Awesome.
Yeah.
So for our character of the county this week, Tom Raymond turns time and talent into gold. This is by our own Sherwood Olin. Damascotta resident Tom Raymond is a retired engineer turned wood craftsman. Raymond and his late wife, Shirley, moved to Damascotta from Connecticut in 1995, but Raymond is a native Mainer from Winslow. He has made furniture and a host of other wooden goods, but his wooden bowls are in a number of art galleries in Maine, as well as New York and Connecticut. To hear more about Raymond, pick up a copy of this week's paper or go to lcnme.com.
Yeah. Seemed like a very sweet article.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, Molly and Michael Amico will chat in a follow-up to Molly's front page story about the Open House of History. So far, the Open House has already hosted a number of events, including cookouts, live music, and lectures. It sounds like Amico has done a ton of work to cultivate a new community space in Waldoboro. So stay tuned to hear more.
So I'm joined by Michael Amico, the founder and president of the board of directors of Open House of History. Hi, Michael.
Hi, Molly.
Thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure.
So I cover Waldoboro, and I have known you because you come to all the meetings that you can. And when I found out that you were opening a nonprofit, which is a lot more than it does many things, I was very intrigued. So I would like to talk to you today about that journey and your background and how it led you there. So let's start with, what is Open House of History exactly?
Well, of course, I had to come up with a short, one sentence or less description of it when people ask me that question. So I would just say, Open House of History is a community-centered space to build empathy and connection through history and then emotional engagement with the past. And I would note that the first half of that description, community space to build empathy and connection, more or less sounds like so many other endeavors in today's world. How do we get together and speak to each other more openly, truthfully across division? So what I'm bringing to that is a real difference, and that's through the approach and that is a question of history and emotion.
So it's a space, it's a physical space. It's the Customs House in Waldoboro, which will resonate for a lot of people because it's kind of a central building. But it also is kind of a broader endeavor, and you do things outside of that space too. Is that fair to say?
Yes, we are based at the historic 1855 Custom House in the center of the downtown village of Waldoboro, but some and maybe many of our activities to come happen outside the building.
Is it fair to call it a museum?
No.
Okay. I'm so tempted. The first time we talked about this, I was like, are you a philosopher? And Michael's like, no.
I am a public humanist.
Oh. So now you have a title.
Well, in some ways, what I'm doing is a project of what might be termed the public humanities, which is an academic term that basically signals the need to translate and apply the ideas that are developed in a university setting to outside its walls, particularly contemporary issues and public spaces. But although we're not a museum in terms of preserving and displaying objects, I guess Open House of History is maybe a way to display and cultivate, and so I guess preserve community itself. So what would it mean for a museum to preserve, display community? And in that sense, it does resonate with holding on to certain objects that have certain power, which museums do, and saying to people who come through, look again. But instead of doing it through objects, although we use objects, but trying to conjure the interior unseen forces of community and give them life and form through the activities and also in that building of the Custom House does resonate with museums and the like.
Yeah, it's a difficult question because then what is a museum? So I guess if you're responding strongly to that and saying, no, it's not a museum, what you're saying is you're not relying solely on objects or on that particular physical space to help people get at the questions that you're asking?
I think that my hesitation of calling it a museum is because people have strong associations with what a museum is and what it should be and how they should act in a museum and when they should go to a museum. And basically, I want to avoid all of those associations, not because I don't like museums, but because I think people slot them into a certain part of their life that it already means this thing, and whether they have time or interest is a function of their understanding of what a museum is.
That's so true. I studied before this science communication, which I feel like is tangentially related to public humanism in a much more niche sense. But we had a whole semester on museum studies, and it's such a challenge that even if you try to design your museum super excitingly and against the norm of what you want people to be doing, they're going to walk in and do exactly the same thing pretty much every time, which is just like kind of walk around in a circle and glance at things.
Right. I've studied museums. I've worked with professional museum designers, and certainly it's impacted how I've designed the encounter with this space. And it's true that even if you put up a sign, people don't necessarily read it. And even if you put an object, they don't even necessarily see it. But those questions of museum design are really important for me in the sense of how do you create a space that activates people in new ways, to see the world in new ways.
And can you talk about why you want to do that or how you got the idea to do that? Because I'd love to hear a little bit more about how your background led you to create this non-museum space.
Well, just looking around the world today, I see so many organizations that are arranged to accommodate particular identities or belief systems and to promote those. So whether they're political groups or religious groups or some kind of other special interest or hobby, you go there because you already align yourself with that. And it's going to feel good because you know that everyone there already agrees with you or believes what you believe. So you must feel like you're right because there's all the other people who think this way. Mm-hmm. But of course, it's only those people who think this way who are there with you.
But they're there.
Yep. And we need that. We need people around us. But unfortunately, the whole world now is just a bunch, more and more so, a bunch of special interest groups. And I wanted to create a space that cut through all those special interests or any kind of affiliation and allow for individual specificity to take center stage and allow for other means of finding commonality between people. So not necessarily an intellectual construct, what do you believe, or what are your politics, but an emotional one. Could you get at a kind of emotional dimension that was more universal than any of these other groups pretend to be?
So you're bringing people together over shared emotion you hope will be more unifying or more accessible to a wider range of people than bringing them together over some more maybe superficial shared interest?
Well, people already share emotion. We just don't have a means to, or a language to talk about it, and certainly not a space. And I'm almost completely sure that foregrounding this emotional terrain of our lives that we already always share with other people will bring people together. The question is, will they come in the door, and how do you open their eyes and ears and their feelings?
Yeah, big questions, really hard ones.
Well, I think to try to answer those is the only way that would keep me going in life, that would keep me alive. I mean, I've been in many different spaces that have tried to do all sorts of things, but ultimately I felt that they weren't satisfying because they were too niche. They were too overdetermined by, as I was saying, these identities or affiliations or professional structures, like the university itself, where you have to, publish a certain amount in a certain way. You have to speak a certain way. You have to believe certain things in order to be validated by your colleagues and to get ahead. And that's as bad as a lot of other religious and political organizations nowadays, where everyone wants to have a purity test. Are you really like us? And this is superficial thinking. That's not real deep. That doesn't really get at the frontiers of the human experience, the edges of the human experience. That's what I'm after. So I had to leave all the familiar structures behind and form my own. That was the only way to do it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's going to work, but the question of not knowing is embedded in the project itself.
In a broader scope than this particular project, it seems to me, not knowing that much about your background, that you're in kind of a transitory period of your life because you were living abroad for a while and now you've settled in Waldoboro and you're embarking on this project with the nonprofit. So does it fit into that? Like, is it a next step personally for you starting this nonprofit? Is it like I also know that you don't want to think of it as an academic endeavor because of the connotations of that word either, but it just feels like the evolution of thought. Is that fair?
It is a product of an evolution of thought that I've had, but also an evolution of feeling and an evolution of interaction and relationships. Who I am now is not who I was 10 years ago in grad school and is not who I was 10 years before that. So it is part of a journey. And is this period of my life more transitory than others? No. I mean, I feel like I'm always moving, by which I mean thinking and feeling. And I like exploring. I like being outside. I like walking through the woods. I need to constantly expose myself to something new. Figure out, oh, what's over there? Or what's that person thinking about? Or what's in that book? So I'm always moving. in that regard. And that's a function of curiosity, but that's the only way to learn anything as well. And in some ways, that would be a primary value of Open House of History, is how do you encourage that kind of curiosity around one's own life and home, that you're always willing and wanting to ask questions.
Do you think that that kind of curiosity is innate?
I think it is innate in humans, because when you're born, you don't know anything or much of anything, but you're wondering and you're crawling around and you're looking. And then everyone around you begins to direct your attention in this way and that way, and things are said to be bad or good or harmful or helpful. And all of that is made sense through emotions, right? So how you feel in response to the unknown begins to give meaning to that unknown object. Oh, that upset you? Well, that's because it's a bad thing. Or, oh, you don't need to be upset. It's actually really nice here. And so emotions are threaded through our lives from the very, very beginning around curiosity. But as life goes on, we have to make choices, specialize in any number of ways, get a job that might limit our imagination or prospects. And so a lot of that openness of curiosity and feeling is closed down over time. And so another objective of Open House of History is to return us to that more childlike awareness of the world that is curious, but also playful, fun, performative.
It's such an exciting prospect, because I think it's so joyful to be curious in many ways. And I agree that it's like the key to bringing people to starting conversations that matter. Obviously, we want people to be curious and want to read our articles and care about municipal government and the world. And I'm constantly thinking, how do I get people to be curious about things like the road budget, which is really hard. So I wonder what you think the elements are to starting that process. And as you get started with Open House of History, what kind of things are you doing to bring people into that space and try to ignite that curiosity?
Well, again, the premise is that there's this whole other dimension of our lives that goes unremarked upon or unnoticed or is truncated in our thought process. And that is what I've been calling an emotional dimension. I've given it the name feelscape of time. It's the space in which you meet other people outside of the daily rigmarole. It's a space where you meet people who existed before you, because their actions and their ideas still move through the space of our lives. So to make anything interesting for me would be to bring in elements of this other dimension that moves people. That is the reason people become outspoken or interested in any issue. But when they actually speak at, say, a town committee meeting about paving or garbage, the structures and strictures of those meetings really limit that entire other world of feeling and thought that is motivating them to be there in the first place. So when you show up, well, when am I supposed to speak? Oh, during citizens' comments. Okay, so I only can talk then. And this is a really unfamiliar world, and now I feel a little bit out of place.
There's a microphone.
And a lectern.
I'm being recorded.
You're being recorded and videoed. And all these other elements, then you have to negotiate, and they could kind of put a clamp on maybe some of the passion and drive that brought you there in the first place, not knowing what you would find, but is what motivated you to not just show up, but maybe also volunteer or get involved in other ways. So, and these limitations are there for a reason. I mean, you know, stuff needs to get done. The conversation needs to end at some point. There needs to be a vote, right? So a lot of these rules and regulations serve that end, but they don't serve making it an interesting story. They don't serve in opening up the narrative that makes anyone's involvement something particular and special to them, which is, I'm assuming, what you might want to get at, or what would
Totally.
certainly interest readers.
Totally. It's how it matters. How does it matter to me? Because that's what gets people to care and want to worry about how it matters to others too, I think. It's a starting point at least.
I think that, though, thinking about it as how trying to answer the question of how it matters for someone else is maybe also too limiting, because people might think, well, it only matters to me for this reason and this reason and that reason. And if you don't check any of those boxes, then it doesn't matter to me. Or it only matters to me because you're right, I live on that street and I didn't know that was happening. But shouldn't it matter to you if you don't live on that street? I don't know. I think it does if you're able to find yourself in this shared terrain with people that you didn't know you were in.
Yeah. That's empathy, I suppose.
That's exactly what
the beauty of it. Yeah.
empathy is designed to connote.
Wow. Yeah, and thinking about narrative and helping people form it and understand it and think about all the issues that we deal with in terms of narrative, which can be such a hard thing to do, but is so productive, I think, because it helps us understand what's happening and place ourselves with it. But then really what drives narrative a lot of the times is emotion. So I guess.
Yeah, I mean, drives not just narrative, but as I was saying, your behavior and your thoughts. Story is a big buzzword nowadays, more and more. And I think, what is that telling us? People want to hear a story or connect to a story or a narrative, as you say. I think it's to bring a more complex human element, of course, back into the public realm. So that means that people are feeling it's missing, right?
Yes.
So that's a good thing that we've gotten to the point of like narrative and story being legible keywords for many more people. But then the next step is, well, what is a story? What's a narrative? What do you mean by that? I mean, people that you disagree with tell stories all the time in order to further their viewpoints.
Yep.
So story as such is not going to get us anywhere, right? So we need to begin thinking about, well, what is it about how information is presented in what we call a story that could engage someone in a new way? And this is where art, even drama, enters the picture. I mean, that's what those art forms have developed to create forms for what we generically call stories in ways that trigger specific feelings, such as empathy, more than others.
Awesome. So can you talk about the ways that you're exploring those different forms in practice in the first few months of having this organization?
So one of the things we have up right now on the ground floor is a 10-foot by 4-foot map of Waldoboro, asking people to place color-coded stickers on the location of, yes, their house, but also what they consider a beautiful place, what they consider a place of unease, a place maybe also that holds memories from family and friends. It's to begin to grow an awareness of the emotional geography of the place, that Waldoboro exists beyond political boundaries, by which I mean geographic boundaries, roads, and property valuation,
Yes.
which are basically the most publicly reiterated forms of mapping
Yep.
a town.
Even in Waldoboro in particular, when I started and I said, what do I need to know? Someone said, well, you need to know there are 4 quadrants to Waldoboro. So I had a map in my head from the very beginning of covering this town.
And when they said 4 quadrants, why did they feel the need to? What did they mean to allude to in that?
My perception was that they wanted me to understand that there are 4 primary modes of existence in this person's estimation of Waldoboro, involving like the way that people make money. One of them, they're talking about clamming. and working on the water as being one of the quadrant, like one of the defining characteristics of a quadrant. People who farm the more built up region, and I still don't know what the fourth is, but I think that it was important for them to tell me that so they could hope that I would understand the diversity of thought and of ways of life that this person understands there to be in Waldoboro. But at the same time, only 4 quadrants is kind of limiting. And I was immediately like, what if it's going to take so much to understand any of them, you know?
Yeah. And I think I think they're all probably naming something very useful to incorporate in your understanding of this place. But the response to to dividing the town into any number of quadrants, however they're categorized, is that, oh, well, then the town is simply a combination of all of these diverse voices and experiences. I mean, that's also a form of non-thinking. I mean, everything's a combination of diverse voices and perspectives, you know? It's like when someone says, oh, I ask, so why do you think this happened? And they say, well, there's a lot of causes. There's really a lot of factors at play.
Good question.
Yeah, and I'm like, you just restated the question.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I was asking, like, can you use your mind to sort of, I don't know, order them or value them or say, well, this one actually is much larger than this other one, or this dimension is a completely different form. You know, you hear it when people talk about, like, well, you need to think about this from a racial perspective, a gender perspective, a class perspective.
As if you could separate those ever.
As if you could, right, separate those ever. But also they are existing in different ways. The substance of the categories are not the same. So it's like it's stupid to equate them even intellectually, because they're operating in like completely different dimensions. And, you know, looking at it through that lens, though, is unfortunately a kind of simplification of a lot of pretty good, rigorous academic work around all these questions. But then when people say, well, okay, so how do we take this knowledge generated in, you know, women's and gender studies and African American studies and apply it to our lives? Well, then some people devise these categories of race, class, gender, race, class, gender, race, class, gender. And I think that in their translation to public discussion, they failed in some bigger picture. And what you're seeing now in the political scene at large is a backlash against the effects of their simplicity.
Yeah.
But to answer your question about some other activities that I'm doing to elicit or to conjure this feelscape of time, the emotional realm of our lives, the mapping is just one way to get people to think about space around them in ways that cuts across time, where something that happened 100 years ago might still be in your mind and thus in your experience of this place and really shapes it. But no one else would know that unless you told them or you somehow signified it. I want to focus on that contentious town issue of waste management and trash. And,
good.
And one of the ideas I have, which I mentioned to you before, is to take a meeting that happened in a town office around trash, where, you know, all the usual suspects show up and give their takes and no one agrees and everyone's coming from a different perspective. And then the response is like, wow, this is a really complex issue. Okay, so what? So is life. But when you go and you hear that meeting, my first thought was, well, what am I not hearing? What's missing? Again, it's back to everything that people aren't able to say at a public meeting. But that's informing their positions and why they might be so passionate about one side or the other. So I want to create a piece that takes what they say at a public meeting and then goes and interviews each of those people and asks them about their life in broader terms and how that might connect to their interest in this particular issue. But just generate a lot more material about who they are or who they think they are and how they think they present in the world, and then interweave their singular voice with their public voice in some kind of dramatic work, some kind of staging of a public meeting that allows for these individual feelings and voices to enter the public space. So, and it's all things that these people would have said. I'm not interested in making up someone's interiority. I'm not interested in writing fiction in any way. But just bringing into this one space something that would be said in a more relaxed, casual setting, and then having maybe someone else read the lines of any one individual. So it's a way to, yes, bring in what's left unsaid, but it's also a way to put distance between your so-called position and who you are, and open up that space between your positions and your feelings, and allow in that space for more investigation and play.
Yeah. Even to open up space between identity and your opinion on a topic, to me sounds so like such a difficult task. So I like what you're describing.
Yeah, but that is exactly the task. Our identities have come to prefigure our thoughts. So if someone knows that I am gay, or I don't know, live in a certain kind of house, or participate in this activity but not that one, they'll immediately assign a whole series of assumptions about what I believe, what my politics are, who I voted for. It's crazy.
And this is the non-thinking you're describing.
It's completely non-thinking. It's just substitution of words, you know?
Yep, it's a puzzle that makes the world much easier to look at in the short term, and yet creates such a web and a mess, and like really a sad situation where we don't know the people in our community at all in the long run, I think, you know?
Yeah, you actually create more distance between people.
Yeah. I wonder about your take on addressing this, which is clearly a national, if not international, problem, kind of a cultural phenomenon at specifically the local level and in Waldoboro. Like, can you speak to why that has called out to you as something that's important to do? Or why is a local venue a good place to start?
Well, all change is local. Now, I know that's like a, cliche.
I love that cliche, though. I like it.
But it's true in a very precise sense, which is meaning, and these stories that we're talking about can be circulating at large through the TV, through the radio. But if you were to challenge them or try to offer a counter narrative, that challenge can only happen in the moment of your articulation. And where are you when you speak this other truth? You're in a very particular place. And that is certainly a town, but it could also be like a specific room. And so the interruption of how we understand the world in order to introduce a new perspective is always something that only happens in a specific place and time. And that's to also say we live in a world that is increasingly digitized, erasing the specificity of where and how you say something, so that if you record yourself saying something or write something online and it circulates, it's not really rooted actually in a particular place and time, and for that reason immediately becomes part of a narrative, and as opposed to an interruption of one. So change is the interruption of story, ironically. And that's also a function of materiality, being present, having a body, right? If it's all virtual, then of course it's going to be absorbed and warped into something else.
Into oblivion.
But if you stand in a place and you confront someone, then, well, it's going to whip up a lot of emotions. but also that is the conditions of empathy, ultimately, right? I mean, catharsis, the word that circulates in artistic circles for someone feeling something that changes their mind or puts something in a new perspective, was first used in this artistic way for the theater, to describe the theater, which is a art form around being present and seeing your neighbor act out your shared world in front of you in a physical space. Mm-hmm. So the importance of pursuing all of these questions and initiatives at a local level is imperative. I mean, that's the only way anything would change. Or you could have a interesting, illuminating conversation. You have to have examples. You have to have some kind of evidence, right? As you know, as a reporter, that's all local. You have to get out of off your desk, right, and go out and see. Well, what is actually there? Someone says this is happening, but what I see is this. Or even if it's as simple as paving roads, go out and see where the road is being paved, and you'll probably notice something that's not talked about. Like, well, it's really interesting that this road, goes through this area of the town, or it curves in a very strange way. Yeah. And all of that is what's informing the feelings and the positions behind the paving as an issue, as something more than just making the road smooth. Mm-hmm. But you wouldn't know unless you went to see.
No, you don't. That's what I love about this job and this community. Right.
Yeah, and that's what I love about being involved in a small town community, where not only does it give the opportunity to go out and see things, but you can basically see most of it pretty quickly, right? Yep. And you can basically know most of the people pretty quickly, which means more work can actually, and thinking and feeling can actually get done if we're able to mobilize those conditions. A lot of people just think like, oh, that's just a small town and I live in a big city, or so what that I see the same people every day, or that's annoying that I see the same people every day. Well, those are conditions that actually can be mobilized in particular ways to create new work, to generate new ideas. So that's why it's so important to only be working locally.
Yeah, totally. And I think what you're saying about the potential to know everybody, or at least most of the people in your community, can make it so much more obvious how little we know about each other and how difficult the huge task of empathy is. So I think it's a good venue to be thinking about that.
And I would add that it's not about knowing fully everything about someone. You can't even know it about yourself.
Yep.
Right.
But you can be aware of their existence.
You can be aware of their existence, and you can also be aware of what you don't know and what you can't know. And I think in many ways, empathy exists at the point of the unknown. Mm-hmm. It's not a function of, oh, now I completely understand you, now I care. That's very suspicious. If you can only understand me and care when you know everything, that's not thinking.
And if you think you can understand another person, maybe you're in trouble.
Exactly. That's another version of it, is as long as I get the right information, I will understand you or the situation. Mm-hmm. That is also a fallacy in thinking.
Yep. And for me, as a former scientist, it was the most disappointing one to become aware of, because you always want to think that you can get the evidence and understand the question. And in some basic science circumstances, maybe you can almost do that, but once you step out into the world, it's never possible. So it opens up the questions that I think you're trying to solve at Open House of History, or at least start. And it's very exciting.
Yeah, how do you sit with that unknown, right? I mean, if we can create a space at Open House of History that is primarily about the ability of sitting with the unknown, then that's a success. That's amazing. Yeah. That's
definitely
extraordinary.
So this will come out after the next art walk, but if people want to come sit with the unknown with you, how can they do that?
Well, we're figuring out when to have regular open hours. Mm-hmm. And these first few months, as we just started, are really trying to just begin conversations with people. And so, you check the website.
Yes, which
openhouseofhistory.org.
Awesome.
to look for event listings and other announcements.
Yes, you guys have a great calendar on there. There's already a lot of stuff.
Yeah, we've done a lot of stuff, and there's stuff to come. And I will be doing another lecture, the third in this series, for the final art walk. So that's the end of August, and that will be themed around National Opioid Awareness Day, Overdose Awareness Day. And what I'm going to be doing is talking about someone who died in Waldoboro after taking too much of a drug. And he was one of the most prominent shipbuilders in the 19th century.
Wow.
And he died in a house that's still standing. And the way I'm going to share that story, to return to that question, is to pose his death in relation to the larger political, social, and cultural scene of the time, which was the coming of the Civil War and the division around slavery in Waldoboro. And he being aligned with a pro-slavery party at the time when the tide of the country in the North was changing, yet the politics of Waldoboro persisted otherwise, created a kind of turmoil that I believe is inseparable from his need to take the drug that led to his death. And so it's a way of thinking about contemporary overdoses and addiction that don't reduce it to simply a problem of someone's, bad choices, but is always an effect of the world in which we live that is not hearing us or helping us or creating circumstances in which we can thrive. So it's a perfect project, this talk, but also I'll try to have some objects on display,
Yes.
even though what we're trying to conjure is this feeling of community.
A couple objects don't hurt.
A couple objects, and it's a good example of the kind of program we want to do, which weaves together history, emotion, and contemporary issues in a particular place, such as Waldoboro.
That is such a good example of the kind of topic that feels so contemporary and so current, and to suddenly realize how far back it reaches. I could see the potential for catharsis there.
Exactly.
Feel it. So that'll be the last Friday in August at
Yes.
Open House of History.
Yes.
And go to the website because Michael's doing a lot over there.
Thanks, Molly.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Beyond the Broadsheet, a podcast by the Lincoln County News. This podcast is produced by Lucas McNelly and Maya Zebert. Tyler Davis of Tyality Productions provides production support. Our theme music is by Stu Mahan and LCN Associate Editor / Bassist Sherwood Olin. The Lincoln County News hits newsstands across the county every Wednesday afternoon. And you can also access our work online at lcnme.com. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion, please email us at info@lcnme.com. As always, we're grateful for the support of our readers and listeners in Lincoln County and beyond. It's been great catching up today, and we'll talk with you again soon.